It appears the 15th Doctor and the soon-to-be replaced, the Companion, were just simply a harbinger of terrible things to come over there at the BBC. Ofcom and BBC Board handed more power to handle complaints about BBC content as UK government publishes long-awaited midterm review. Oh wait, it's gonna get more woke. Ofcom and the BBC Board are to be handed more power to oversee complaints about the BBC content, including on its website and YouTube channel. Oh, great. As the government's midterm review into corporations focuses intensely on the issue of complaints and impartiality. Hilarious that you're going to lump the BBC, just beacons for objectivity. You're just going to go ahead and say that, oh, you guys are going to be in charge of more of your material. Make sure that better reflects modern day. The BBC has agreed to undertake major reforms to boost audience confidence in its impartiality. Hilarious when a lot of the people, the insiders that are out there, think that actually the BBC is far too, pause for shock, is a far too conservative outlet. They're rotten to the core, and it's only going to get worse from here. The Culture and Media and Sports Department said, with the organization taking on all recommendations from the review that takes place at the approximate midpoint of each 11-year-long BBC charter. You know what you should do? You know the conclusion that you should eventually come to when it comes to this? Defunding the BBC, perhaps. Just throwing that out there, letting it stand on its own, on the quality of its own product, instead of having taxpayer subsidies, keeping this wokeness afloat. That includes extending Ofcom's oversight to complaints about the BBC website and YouTube channel, handing Ofcom a legally binding responsibility to review more of the BBC's complaints decisions, and forging a similar responsibility for the BBC's board, newly chaired by Samir Shah, a good Brit, to oversee the complaints process. Ofcom, for those of you who don't know, it's akin to the FCC, or forget what it's called in Canada, Justin Trudeau's censorship board, CRTC. That's what it is. Anyways, a subcommittee of the board, which will benefit from outside perspectives provided by independent advisors, I'm sure, will also be given greater powers to scrutinize and challenge how the BBC handles complaints. Whatever. Notably, the person responsible for handling complaints will soon report directly to Director General Tim Davie, rather than the director responsible for editorial policy, which the CMS said will separate pre-broadcast editorial policy and post-broadcast complaints resolution. The BBC made a number of proposals during the review period that they were subsequently recommended by the government. Some have already been taken on. Deadline understands, giving Ofcom and the board more power, forging legally binding responsibilities, and taking power to examine complaints away from the BBC program makers is all part of the government's drive to shore up the complaints process and make it as independent as possible. Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, so you're just moving the complaints department from one intensely ideologically driven institution over to another. Should make a world of difference. Culture Secretary Lucy Fraser said the changes will better set up the BBC to ask difficult questions of itself. We all rely on the BBC being the best it can be, and this review will help ensure is what the British public gets. No, it's not. Like, come on. In a rapidly changing media landscape, the BBC needs to adapt or risk losing the trust of audience it relies upon. Like, the only thing that's lower than the BBC's approval rating is the Conservative government. Like, it's trash, bruh. Following constructive conversations with BBC and Ofcom, we have recommended reforms that I believe will improve accountability while boosting public confidence in the BBC's ability for impartial and respond to concerns raised by license fee payers. It's so funny. This is the same government that also wanted to petition Rumble, successfully petitioned YouTube and TikTok in order to demonetize Russell Brand before he was charged and hasn't been charged with anything. hilarious. A lack of public confidence. Oh yeah, let's dig down on this for a second. Published today, the midterm review concludes the BBC current complaints process known as BBC First, where audience complaints are normally addressed by the BBC before they can be escalated to Ofcom, allows license fee payers to hold the BBC directly accountable. Shut up. That's like saying, oh yes, we take all of our consumer complaints very seriously, and now we're going to have a different department handle them because they're taking them so very seriously. Shut up. But it said impartiality continues to be a key concern for audiences and highlighted a lack of public confidence in the way the BBC currently handles complaints, which is not at all, and just by doubling down. While complaints about BBC content are never far from the spotlight, they've been particularly front and center over the past few months in the main due to its sometimes controversial covering of the Israel-Hamas war. Yeah, where are you going to go with this? Along with some viewers taking umbrage with its royal reporting. Speaking of the CMS committee recently, Shaw said that it would push a review coverage of Israel-Hamas, particularly the controversial question of whether BBC should label Hamas terrorists. Yeah, interesting. How are you going to address the IDF? It seems to me that there is enough in terms of criticism in the way that the BBC has covered this war. So is all of this getting pushed forward because of the reporting about our greatest ally? Interesting. BBC Contact attracted more than 8,500 complaints in its first 2 weeks of January, double the previous fortnight, and its executive complaints unit examined 27 in detail. Wow. What a large percentage. BBC spokesperson said no other organization takes its commitment to impartiality more seriously. Oh, just stop. I can only laugh so much. We have well-established and detailed plans to sustain and further improve standards. Sure you do. We don't know. We know this matters to audiences. Yeah, sure thing. And the BBC continues to be the #1 source for trusted news with the highest scores for impartiality and accuracy. Are you laughing? During discussions over the midterm review, we proposed and implemented a number of reforms, including strengthening our complaints procedures, which now form part of the conclusion. We are pleased the government has fully taken our proposals on board. We remain committed to continuous improvement to ensure we deliver for all license fee payers. Meanwhile, the CMS recommended the BBC strengthen transparency and engagement with the commercial competitors. Well, why would you have to do that? They're already so transparent and authentic, making changes to its services, especially in areas such as local news and radio. The department also pointed to its need for diversity of thought and opinions to better reflect in the BBC's decision making. Yeah, that's probably something that's been talked about a lot. Now, what are you going to do with that? Citing audience groups such as disabled viewers, oh, for fuck's sakes, and people with lower socioeconomic backgrounds. No, just providing a fair and honest take for an average sensible person that's not so far to the left. They think that Chairman Mao is a conservative bigot and that Stalin's red affinity is that of a MAGA hat. Midterm review is conducted around halfway through the BBC's 11-year charter. So yeah, the current charter ending on December 31st, 2027, handing Ofcom some of the oversight of BBC's regulation and complaints was one of the flagship changes to have come the previous charter review, with Ofcom becoming corporation's first ever external regulator. Fantastic. They've been doing such a wonderful job in the intervening years. So guess what, guys? The BBC not going to be getting any better. In fact, it's probably going to end up being worse. And don't worry if you think that change, when in regards to license fees and it going to coverage and programming that you despise and that you would rather have better reflect your individual opinions and takes, don't expect that to change anytime soon. So with all that said, thank you all very much for the gift of your time. I've been Don Consuelo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Take care, everyone.